Her name was Emma. Shy, smart, the kind of girl who kept her head down and her heart guarded. College was a new beginning for her, but she wasn't looking for love. All she wanted was to study, make her parents proud, and maybe make a few friends along the way. But fate had other plans. It was the first day of orientation. The auditorium buzzed with laughter, chatter, and the awkward energy of hundreds of new students. Emma sat quietly near the edge of the room, gripping her notebook. The moment felt too big, too loud. Then her pen fell, rolled right under the seat in front of her. As she leaned to grab it, someone beat her to it. "Here," a voice said. She looked up and saw Jake. Messy hair, soft smile, kind eyes. He handed her the pen and smiled like they'd known each other forever. "Thanks," Emma whispered, her cheeks warm. That was it. Just a pen. Just a moment. But sometimes that's all it takes. In the weeks that followed, Jake kept showing up. Not in a pushy way, just enough to make her notice. In the library, he'd sit a few tables away. In the cafeteria, he'd wave. Soon, they were walking to class together, swapping playlists, and sharing silly jokes that made no sense to anyone but them. He made her laugh. He made her feel seen. For a girl who had always felt invisible. Jake was like sunlight. One day, after a late study session, they sat on the college lawn. The stars were out. The air was still. Jake looked at her and said, "I come to college every day for two reasons, to pass, and to see you." Emma's heart did something strange. A twist, a flutter. She didn't reply right away, she didn't have to. They both knew what was happening. Falling in love in college always sounds cliché. But when it happens to you, it feels like magic. Emma started to open up. She told Jake about her childhood fears, her favorite books, her silly dreams. Jake listened, encouraged her, protected her. They became inseparable, the kind of couple others smiled at when they walked by. Emma thought she'd found her person. But what she didn't know was that Jake had secrets, dark ones. Because while Emma was falling in love, Jake was pretending. And behind that smile there was something she couldn't see yet. By the end of their first year, Emma and Jake were everywhere together. Late-night walks, surprise coffee dates, study sessions that turned into deep conversations about life, pain, and purpose. Emma had never felt this way before, safe, adored, and finally understood. Jake had a way of making her believe they were meant to be. He'd say things like, "We're not just college sweethearts. We're soulmates." And Emma, with all her heart, believed him. They were young, sure. But when you're in love, time doesn't matter, and Jake? He made her feel like forever was just around the corner. Just 3 months into their second year, Jake dropped to one knee. Not at a fancy restaurant. Not in front of a crowd. Just them, on the rooftop of their dorm, under a sky full of stars. "I don't want to wait anymore," he whispered. "I want to wake up next to you every day. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" Emma cried. Tears of joy. Tears of disbelief. Because for the first time in her life, she felt chosen. She said yes. Everyone said it was too soon, classmates, professors, even some of her friends. "You're only 20. Finish college first. Don't rush." But Emma didn't care. Love, she thought, doesn't run on a clock. And Jake made her feel like time was a gift, not a limit. Within 6 months, their small wedding took place in a cozy backyard filled with fairy lights, soft music, and the scent of fresh flowers. Emma wore a simple white dress. Jake, a navy blue suit. They exchanged handwritten vows, laughed through their nervousness, and promised a lifetime together. Everyone saw a young couple in love, but no one saw what Jake had already started hiding. Behind the kisses and the smiles were signs Emma ignored. He didn't want her talking to guy friends anymore. He didn't like when she wore certain clothes. He started making jokes about her weight, her opinions, her dreams. Emma laughed them off at first. "He's just being silly," she told herself. "He loves me too much." But the wedding was like a switch. The moment the rings were exchanged, something inside Jake shifted. The charming boy from college? He started to disappear. He was colder, quieter. He'd snap at little things. And he hated when Emma talked about getting a job. "I'll provide. You just stay home," he insisted. Emma, still believing in the man she married, nodded. She thought he was just stressed. Maybe marriage was an adjustment. But deep inside, something felt wrong. She couldn't explain it, but it was there, a silent alarm in the back of her mind. Still, she stayed. Because love isn't just about butterflies. Sometimes it's about promises, even when they're broken. The first time Jake raised his voice, it caught Emma off guard. It was over something small. She had forgotten to add sugar to his coffee. He slammed the mug on the counter, eyes cold. "Can't you do one thing right?" he snapped. Emma froze. She thought he was joking, but there was no smile on his face. Later, he apologized, brought her flowers, kissed her forehead, and said, "Sorry, babe. I had a rough day. You know I love you, right?" And Emma, she forgave him. Because love, she believed, was about patience. But that wasn't the last time. Soon, it became a pattern. Jake didn't like her calling her mom too often. Didn't want her texting old college friends. And if she ever wore makeup, "Who are you trying to impress?" he'd ask, half laughing, half threatening. He started checking her phone, criticizing her clothes, making her feel like everything she did was wrong.
But the truth
Emma
was,
tried
she
to
was
convince
shrinking day
herself
by
he
day.
was just protective,
Her laughter faded.
that he loved
Her
her
confidence
too much. Vanished. She stopped writing, stopped dreaming, and when she cried, Jake would look at her with disgust. "You're so dramatic." The man who once made her feel like the center of the universe now made her feel invisible. But still she held on. Because when someone breaks you slowly, you don't always realize you're being broken. Not until it's too late. Emma once believed that the worst kind of pain was physical. But what Jake did to her wasn't something you could see. No bruises, no blood. Just words sharp, quiet, and constant. And they cut deeper than any blade ever could. It started with little comments. "God, you've gained weight since the wedding. Why are you so sensitive all the time? You're lucky I even married you." He'd say it with a smirk, like it was a joke. But Emma didn't laugh. She stopped looking in mirrors, stopped dressing up. Every time she tried to speak up, he twisted it around. "You're just overreacting. Stop being such a child. You make everything so hard." At first, she fought back, tried to explain how it made her feel. But Jake always won because he didn't yell. He manipulated. He'd gaslight her into believing she was the problem, that she was ungrateful, that she was too much. Soon, Emma stopped talking altogether. She learned to read his moods before she opened her mouth. She walked on eggshells in her own home. Her world became smaller. Her smile became rarer. And the worst part? No one knew. To outsiders, Jake was still the loving husband. Handsome, polite, and charming at dinner parties. But behind closed doors, he was poison. Emma started writing in a journal. The only place she could scream without being heard. She didn't know it yet. But those pages would one day become her voice. And Jake's undoing. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind where the world outside felt still. Emma was in the kitchen making tea. She had just taken a small freelance project, her first in months. Something that gave her a sense of self again, a spark. Jake walked in, asked where she had been all morning. She told him lightly, carefully about the online project, the client, the small income. She smiled, hoping he'd be proud. Instead, his eyes darkened. "You took a job without asking me?" His voice was low, dangerous. Emma blinked. "It's just part-time, Jake, from home." "I thought." Smack. The sound echoed louder than the words. Her cheek stung. Her mind went blank. She had been slapped. Before she could even process it, Jake pushed her back. She stumbled, hitting the edge of the counter. Tears filled her eyes, not just from the pain, but from shock. Jake didn't look sorry. He looked cold. "Don't ever do something behind my back again." Then he walked away like nothing happened. Emma sank to the floor, shaking, hands trembling as she touched her face. The tea kettle screamed behind her, but all she could hear was the shattering of something inside her. For hours, she sat in silence. No tears, just disbelief. She had ignored the red flags, the control, the insults. But now it was real. He had crossed a line, and something told her this wouldn't be the last time. She picked up her pen that night, wrote every detail in her journal, because a part of her finally understood. If she didn't protect her truth, no one else would. Jake had always worn two masks. One for the world, a charming, responsible husband who brought flowers and paid bills on time. And another for Emma, cruel, possessive man who saw her not as a partner but as property. But now that mask was slipping. And what lay beneath it was even darker than Emma had feared. After that first slap, things didn't get better. Jake apologized, of course he did. He always did. Cried, promised, bought her a necklace the next day. But the pattern continued. Pushes, shoves, yelling, silence. Then came the threats. "You think anyone would believe you? You leave me, you'll regret it. You're nothing without me." Emma started sleeping with the door locked, heart racing at every sound. She stopped replying to friends. She didn't even tell her family the truth. How could she? He made her feel like no one would believe her. And deep down, she was starting to believe it too. What Emma didn't know was that Jake had already moved on. He had started seeing someone else, a younger girl named Leela. Fresh out of college, naive, excited by Jake's stories, impressed by his man-of-the-house confidence. He met her at the gym, started messaging her on Instagram, and within a few months, he was spending more time with her than with his wife. But divorce? No, that wouldn't work for Jake. He didn't want to divide assets, didn't want the shame, didn't want people asking questions. He wanted freedom without consequences. And that's when his thoughts turned sinister. Late one night, as Emma sat quietly on the couch reading, Jake stood in the doorway, watching her. Her eyes were tired, her spirit dimmed. He didn't see a human being anymore. He saw a problem to get rid of. That week, Jake started acting sweet. unusually so, made her favorite dinner, took her for ice cream, played her old playlists, held her hand. Emma felt confused but hopeful. Maybe things were finally getting better? Then one evening he brought her tea, chamomile, her favorite, warm, calming, safe. She took a sip, then another. Minutes later, she began to feel dizzy. Her head spun, her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. Jake sat beside her, holding her hand, watching her struggle. "It's okay," he whispered. "Just close your eyes." She looked at him, fear and betrayal flashing across her face. And then everything went black. When she didn't wake up, Jake called 911, told them he found her unconscious, blamed stress, anxiety, maybe a panic attack, played the grieving husband role perfectly. The autopsy was rushed. The cause of death listed as accidental overdose. No one questioned it. Jake walked away free, attended the funeral in a black suit, crying crocodile tears. The world saw a man who had lost his wife. But behind the curtain, a killer had just gotten away with murder. Or so he thought. Jake had always known how to play a part. He was a master manipulator, smiling when the world expected it, crying when the moment demanded it. So, at Emma's funeral, he played his greatest role yet. The devastated widower. Dressed in a crisp black suit, he kept his eyes lowered, his face pale and sunken. When people hugged him, he didn't say much, just nodded, wiped away a tear and whispered, "She was everything to me." Emma's family believed him. Why wouldn't they? They had seen his social media posts, the anniversary pictures, the birthday surprises, the cute couple selfies. To the outside world, their marriage was happy. He had crafted that illusion carefully. But the truth? Emma had died alone, afraid, and poisoned by the man who now stood over her coffin, pretending to break. Her mother sobbed into Jake's chest, whispering, "You took such good care of her." Jake clenched his jaw to stop from laughing. It was too easy, too clean. He had deleted the browser history, wiped the counters, thrown away the crushed pills he had slipped into her tea. The toxicology report listed it as an accidental overdose, maybe too much anxiety medication, stress, depression, nothing suspicious. He'd even found her on the couch, called 911 right away, cried to the paramedics. No one suspected a thing. And just like that, Jake was free. Free to move on. Free to spend more time with Leela, the new girl who had no idea what he'd done. Free to take over Emma's small savings account, her laptop, her belongings. He packed up her things quickly. Some he gave away, some he trashed. The only thing he left untouched was her old vanity. He planned to donate it later. It didn't matter to him, but he should have looked closer. Because inside that vanity, taped behind the mirror, was a worn leather journal. Handwritten, tear-stained, raw, Emma's final voice. And Jake had no idea that the truth he thought he buried was still alive. It had been a week since the funeral when Megan, Emma's younger sister, came to pack up her things. The house was cold, eerily quiet. Megan had never liked Jake much, but she had kept her distance during the marriage. Emma had stopped sharing things over time, always saying, "It's fine. I'm just tired." Now, with her gone, Megan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She moved through the house slowly, touching the memories Emma left behind. A book with a dog-eared page. A sweater still smelling faintly of her perfume. The tea mug on the counter, rinsed but not washed. Megan entered the bedroom, heart heavy, and began sorting through Emma's things. She opened the vanity, the same one Emma had kept since college. Drawers filled with lipstick, hair ties, old receipts. But when Megan reached into the back, her fingers brushed something soft and hidden. Taped beneath the bottom drawer was a worn, brown leather journal. She froze. Emma had always been a writer, a private one. Megan slowly peeled the journal free and opened to the first page. "If something ever happens to me, read this." Her breath caught in her throat. Page after page, Emma's pain spilled out in ink-dated entries. Shaky handwriting and raw honesty. She wrote about the verbal abuse, the gaslighting, the fear. The moment Jake first slapped her. The night she locked the bedroom door. Her growing suspicion that Jake was seeing someone else. And then, the final entries. Emma wrote about the tea. She described how Jake had started acting unusually kind. How the tea had tasted slightly bitter. How dizzy she had felt. She hadn't finished the last entry. The ink trailed off in a jagged line, like she had passed out while writing. Megan sat on the floor, hands shaking, tears flooding her eyes. This wasn't just grief anymore, this was murder. She rushed to her car with the journal clutched to her chest. Drove straight to the police station. At first, they hesitated. Jake had been so cooperative. The autopsy had ruled it accidental. But Megan wouldn't back down. She demanded a reinvestigation. Handed over the journal, every page a cry for help the world had missed. She pushed for a second toxicology test, this time looking for specific compounds. And this time, they found it. A sedative. One Emma was never prescribed. The journal became evidence. Emma's voice, silenced in life, was screaming in death. And now, the story Jake had so carefully constructed was falling apart. After weeks of silence and mourning, her words finally pierced through the fog of grief and ignited something unshakable in her sister Megan. The pain, confusion, and quiet suspicions had been haunting her ever since Emma's sudden, unexplained death. But now she had proof, and she had purpose. With trembling hands and burning eyes, Megan placed the journal into the hands of Detective Clara Hayes, a seasoned investigator who had seen hundreds of domestic abuse cases, but rarely ones as chillingly calculated as this. Clara read the entries page by page, her face going from thoughtful to concerned to visibly disturbed. There was no doubt this wasn't a tragic accident. This was premeditated murder. The toxicology report had listed Emma's cause of death as a possible overdose. But something didn't sit right. At Megan's request, the samples were reanalyzed, this time with specific markers in mind. Within days, it was confirmed lorazepam, a strong sedative never prescribed to Emma, found in high concentration in her system, mixed into her tea, just as she described in her final journal entry. Now, the case that had been quietly closed was reopened, and this time, Emma's truth led the way. Detective Clara and her team began a full-scale investigation. Phone records, purchase histories, digital receipts, browser logs, and one by one, the pieces began falling into place. Jake had used a VPN and a fake name to order sedatives online. The payment trail was buried under layers of deception, but not enough to hide from a determined investigator. At the same time, Megan unearthed Emma's old tablet, a device Jake had overlooked. Inside were voice recordings Emma had secretly made during arguments. In them, Jake's mask slipped. He threatened her, belittled her, mocked her fears. One recording captured him saying, "You think anyone's going to believe you? You're lucky I haven't snapped yet." It was horrifying, but it was gold in the eyes of law enforcement. With a mountain of circumstantial and digital evidence, Detective Clara presented the findings to the district attorney's office. A team was assigned, a case was built, and after weeks of silence, Megan finally received the call she'd been waiting for. Jake, living freely, now dating a younger woman named Leela, had no idea the net was closing in around him. He still played the grieving husband on social media. He still walked through town like a man above suspicion. That ended the morning detectives surrounded him at the gym. He was stunned, confused, angry. "What is this about?" he demanded. But Clara's voice was firm. "You're under arrest for the murder of your wife, Emma Clark. You have the right to remain silent." Handcuffed and humiliated, Jake was led out as cameras clicked and gymgoers stared. The news hit fast and hard. For the public, it was a shock. How could someone like Jake Clark, the charming, handsome husband, be capable of something so monstrous? For those who had known Emma, it was a devastating vindication. Everything she had suffered behind closed doors was real, and now the world was seeing it. In the courtroom, Emma's family sat in the front row, Megan gripping her mother's hand tightly. The prosecutor, a relentless woman named Alicia Ramos, opened with Emma's journal. She read the last paragraph aloud, Emma's words echoing through the silent room. "If something ever happens to me, and I'm not here to tell the truth, let this be my voice." The jury listened. The judge blinked back emotion. Even members of the press sat in stunned silence. Witnesses were called. Experts testified. The new toxicology report confirmed the lethal dose. A digital forensics analyst walked the jury through Jake's online sedative purchases. Emma's therapist, who she had secretly begun seeing months before her death, testified that Emma feared for her life, and that she believed Jake might one day hurt her. Jake's defense tried to spin a narrative. She was unstable. She had anxiety, maybe she overdosed on her own. But every word from Emma's journal shredded that lie. Her entries were logical, detailed, and heartbreakingly clear. Then Megan took the stand. With tears in her eyes and fire in her voice, she told the jury everything. From the early days of their love story to the silence that grew around Emma after marriage. She played Emma's recordings. She shared screenshots of Emma's final texts. And she ended by reading Emma's unfinished final journal entry, her voice cracking as she said, "I think he's trying to kill me. I don't know if I'll wake up tomorrow." The courtroom was dead silent. Jake stared ahead, jaw tight, but his mask had cracked. The final blow came during cross-examination. Under pressure, Jake slipped. He snapped. He shouted at the prosecutor. Blamed Emma. "She was always pushing me. She made me do everything." The jury didn't flinch. They had seen enough. After 3 days of deliberation, the verdict was delivered. Guilty, first-degree murder. The sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Megan wept. Emma's mother finally exhaled. Even Clara, who had built the case with clinical focus, allowed herself to smile. Jake, once so proud, so in control, was escorted from the courtroom in shackles, his eyes filled not with grief, but with rage and fear. Emma hadn't survived, but her words had. Her voice had brought justice. Her silence had screamed louder than Jake ever expected. And justice finally rose. Jake had always believed he was untouchable. For years, he had controlled every situation, every conversation, and every person who dared step too close. He played the role of the perfect partner in public and the predator behind closed doors. But now, in courtroom C12, that carefully built mask was shattered beyond repair. The courtroom was silent, heavy with the weight of justice hanging in the air. Everyone present, the judge, the jury, the spectators, had seen the truth, not just through evidence or testimony, but through Emma's own words, scrawled into the pages of her journal, with trembling hands and a desperate hope that someone would find them. And someone had. Jake sat stiffly at the defendant's table, his suit no longer crisp, his expression no longer calm. For the first time since the trial began, he looked inhuman, small, weak, uncertain. Across from him sat Megan, Emma's sister, with her fists clenched on her lap, eyes locked on the man who had destroyed her family. She wasn't crying anymore. She was waiting. The judge glanced over the jury. The foreperson stood. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jacob Clark, guilty of murder in the first degree. Gasps a sob, then silence again, the kind that shakes your bones. Jake didn't react. Or maybe he couldn't. His mouth twitched slightly, but his eyes betrayed something deeper, panic. Realization. The dawning truth that for once, he couldn't lie or manipulate his way out. The judge nodded slowly and leaned forward. Jacob Clark, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers. Your actions were not only premeditated but carried out with malice, control, and without remorse. You murdered your wife, a woman who trusted you, loved you, and feared you. She paused, and for a moment, even she looked shaken. This court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The gavel fell like a thunderclap. Megan let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding for the last 3 years. Emma's mother clutched her arm, tears streaming, whispering, she did it. She did it. Double quotes. And Emma had. Even in death, she'd fought. Not with fists, not with rage, but with truth. Jake was escorted out of the courtroom in shackles, his once confident stride replaced with the defeated drag of a man who had lost everything: power, freedom, and reputation. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but he didn't respond. He couldn't. The world now saw him not as a grieving husband, but as a murderer. And that was Emma's final revenge. Not a scream, not vengeance from beyond the grave, but a quiet, relentless exposure of the monster hiding in plain sight. What Jake never realized was that Emma was documenting everything, every insult, every threat, every uneasy silence. He thought she was broken, obedient. But she was recording him, writing, preparing. She knew one day she might not be here, but she wasn't going to let him win. Her revenge was cold, silent, delayed, and devastatingly complete. Later that night, Megan visited Emma's grave. The sky was painted with soft stars and a breeze whispered through the trees. She knelt, placing the final version of the journal, the one used in the trial, beside the headstone. She smiled sadly. You did it, Em, you brought him down. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small pin, the logo of the Silent Pages Foundation, the nonprofit she had created in Emma's name, a program for domestic abuse survivors who couldn't speak openly, offering them tools to journal safely, to record, to protect themselves. Emma's story was no longer just a warning. It was a weapon. In the following weeks, media outlets picked up the case. Podcasts, news channels, documentaries. Justice for Emma trended for days. People from around the world reached out. Survivors wrote letters to Megan saying, Emma gave me courage. Her words saved my life. I left because of her. Jake was transferred to a maximum security prison upstate. Inmates there didn't take kindly to wife killers, especially ones who once strutted around like kings. He was no longer feared. He was forgotten. He'd spend every day in a 6x8 cell, replaying the trial in his mind, haunted by Emma's words, by the voice he tried so hard to silence. That was her final sentence. He had stolen her future, but she destroyed his legacy. Because Emma's story didn't end in that living room the night he poisoned her. It ended in a courtroom, in justice, in change. And it lived on in every woman who picked up a pen and wrote, if something ever happens to me, let this be my voice. Sometimes, the people who say they love you the most can also be the ones who hurt you the deepest. Emma's story teaches us something powerful. Your voice matters, even when you're scared. No one deserves to be treated with cruelty, silence, or fear, not in private, not behind closed doors, and not by someone who claims to care for you. Love should never make you feel small. It should never leave you afraid to speak, afraid to live, or afraid to be yourself. If something doesn't feel right, trust that feeling. If someone controls, insults, or threatens you, that's not love, it's abuse. And if you can't speak up yet, write it down, record it, tell someone you trust. Your truth is your power. Emma didn't survive, but her story saved lives because she didn't let her pain stay buried. She fought back in the only way she could, with courage and with truth. So remember, your voice has power, your story has weight, and you are never alone.